Hi there, Chris here with another fresh tip for you all. In this video, we are going to have a little bit of fun here, and we are going to work on a 1 to 12 scale sculpt of Henry Cavill's head, and this is going to be for my Bandai Intercessor Space Marine. As you can see, I already applied the neck guard and everything to make it fit the figure and primed it in Stylo-Res light gray. We're going to use pink flesh with a little bit of acrylic thinner. We're going to use a Renegade Chrome airbrush, spraying it around 30 psi, and we are going to apply this base coat onto the model. As you can see, I'm just simply testing the flow out of the brush, make sure I have the right proper psi as I work, but I mean, it's just a base coat, so it's really not terribly difficult or anything like that. I've thinned the paint down roughly in a 1-to-1 mix ratio, just so it flows out of the brush nice and smoothly. And as you can see, we are just simply working our way around the face areas, catching the ears, getting into all sorts of different directions, spraying it right into those ears. And of course, you can see in this upper brow, you can see it's a little gray in there, so we're going to come in and spray right up into that area as well, making sure that we have good even coverage everywhere on the face because reasons. Once that's all said and done, we're going to come in with some light skin, and this is from scale 75. We're going to just simply throw this into the pot. I simply just drained the airbrush, and so whatever residual pink flesh is in there tones the light flesh down just a little bit. It's probably quite negligible in how much it changes. Spraying in a downward motion to the head so that more of the color gathers up near the forehead, creating basically all our highlights and shadows. And you can see here, I'm just kind of fighting along with how intense this is going to build up. And even with the pink flesh and then laying the light flesh on top, it's still quite a big jump in tone. So we're going to be playing with this Prussian blue hue. This is Liquitex ink. I'm going to use a sponge. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw a little bit onto my palette, take a generous amount of water, thin it down just a little bit. Using that same brush, it's a shade wash brush from Citadel, I'm going to apply it over the flesh areas. And you can see it looks quite heavy, and it actually is kind of heavy, but really what's happening, I probably could have used some flow aid as well, just so that it creeped into more of the recesses and such, but I'm using the sponge to draw the excess off. But what I was looking to gain was the fact that it creates a slightly irregular pattern on the surface, resembling basically the veins and such under the flesh tones. And initially I was mostly okay with how this all looks. You can see it gets a little heavy in some spaces, but that's fine because we can come back in and wipe it away. So it was looking a little very blue, especially on a lot of the areas here. So I used a clean damp brush, and basically what I end up doing is drawing out the ink from a majority of areas, leaving it in just deep dark crevices. But otherwise, yeah, I just simply draw it off the main areas of the forehead as well as the cheekbones and along the nose. We're coming back in with the pink flesh, and we are going to thin this down with medium. I believe it's a 1-to-1 ratio, and then so it's nice and thin, and we slowly layer this in. I'm spraying at a roughly greater than 45-degree angle towards the face. I still want some of those darker tones to remain underneath, but otherwise we're leaving a majority of that blue to remain in some of those shadows. Again, just give us slightly deeper tones. Next, we're going to use some light skin again, and we are going to spray this down. I think I simply added this to the paint, so it actually is more like a 50-50 mix, and you can see it's actually not quite a big jump. And because I had it thinned out in a 1-to-1 fashion, we can slowly build up more layers, and in fact, that's pretty much what I did. I'm going to seal this with some satin varnish from Vallejo. And it's really concentrating just on the face areas, the flesh areas of the face, but otherwise, basically it's just not the back of the head or anything like that. It's just really concentrating just on the flesh tones. I'm going to take Indian Shadow from scale 75. I'm going to use some of the medium that I've been using to thin these paints out with, which is from MIG Ammo. And I'm going to use Liquitex Flow Aid, and I'm going to make a shade wash out of this of this color, helping of water as well. And as you can see, I simply apply it over a majority of the flesh areas. It looks really, really intense at the moment, but fear not, because I'm going to clean out my brush off and basically begin feathering out the color. And basically what we're doing here is we're just drawing it off the main portions of where we want light to gather, or where the highlights would be. So it's on the forehead, the cheekbone, the nose, the lip, and the bottom of the ears kind of thing. So basically we're just slowly building up the tone. And really what it was happening is I was working from a picture of Henry Cavill, and I was looking at movie stills, which is, this one's based off of, I believe, Superman, when he's he's still kind of looking for himself kind of thing early in the movie. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, and all the pictures I was finding from the movie is that it has this really steep color grade on it, and that's kind of hard to determine painting the face and going for, a somewhat natural kind of look for the guy. And so I was kind of, I don't know. So I was looking for pictures, and basically I was just working out photographs from like promotions and stuff like that. Light flesh and pale skin. I'm going to mix these in roughly a 1-to-1, throwing them into the airbrush with a bit of thinner and basically spraying almost straight down at the face. And again, we're back to kind of where we were before. And I was kind of, all right, well, we'll keep building with it. And I think the Indian channel is just a little too much. Here you can see I laid another layer down, just building up that intensity. And it makes his flesh look really kind of contrasting. And I just was not 100% behind this look, and so we will correct as we work along. Actually, we will kind of just jump a step here. Gilliman flesh is next, and I'm going to use some contrast medium. I'm going to thin it out roughly a 1-to-1 using the shade wash brush, and we are basically going to apply a very generous amount onto the flesh areas, so a lot in the ears and as well as the face. And you can see I'm just simply throwing it on there, allowing it to gather where contrast paint likes to gather in their nooks and crannies. And then really quickly, I will draw some of the excess off his forehead and off his cheekbones, as it were. You see a clean brush right here, and I just simply draw the excess off the nose as well, off the cheekbones. But otherwise, I leave most of this to remain where it is. And I'm happier with how the overall tone looks. And of course, if we were going for a stylized look like you see him out of the movies, like out of the, when he's Superman or what have you, we could just leave it in this really contrasty kind of look. But I wanted something a little bit more akin to how the man actually looks. We're going to take light skin again and pale skin. We're going to mix these, and we're going to use a little bit of glaze medium from Vallejo. Basically, we're going to mix these in roughly a 1-to-1. And about 2 or 3 drops of medium as well. And basically what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to glaze in some highlights along his nose, along his forehead, and along his cheeks and his lower eyelids as well, and as well as his lip, I believe, and the bottom of his ears. And with these glazes, I'm just simply reinforcing some of these high points, as well as getting into the his eye sockets as well. And again, I was kind of like back and forth. Now on camera here, this looks really kind of stark as far as how the overall flesh tone feels, and to the eye it wasn't quite as bad, but it is still quite not where I wanted it. I still wanted a bit more warmth, and everywhere I was kind of thinking of where I should be heading with this just wasn't seeming right as far as like how I wanted to build this color up. And so I started glazing in these transitions on the flesh, and I end up creating quite a bit of texture on his face, and it ends up looking more like a lot of like wrinkles in his skin and things of that nature. And so it gives him a very dramatic look, but it wasn't really what I was looking for. So I was kind of so I basically put it down for the day. And yeah, you can see here's after quite a few layerings of highlights, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know, I'm just not 100% behind it. So I take some of the pink flesh which was our initial base color. I thin it down into a glaze. I use some of that glaze medium, and then I begin pushing this towards the shadow points on the face, kind of just helping to just bring back some of the tones and the the flesh tones and everything on the model. And it sort of started to work for me, and I was, getting very happy and, starting to feel it a little bit. And I was kind of pushing it back and forth with highlights and pushing these shade tones as well. And finally, I eventually settle on just putting the model down and walking away, and I'll come have a look at it, the following day kind of thing. And so that's basically what ends up happening. And I come in with Indian Shadow next, and again, I'm going to take a very generous amount of water, just thinning this out just ever so slightly, and I'm just going to work on the lips because I'm kind of tired of meddling around with this flesh. But again, with these flesh tones, it was more of an experiment building up towards a more of a natural tone. And when you're working with larger scale kind of kits, sometimes the techniques we use in regular miniature painting, as far as like space marines and things of that nature, it just doesn't quite look the same. And you can see here, like, this is a very dramatic look on the face, but this head is about an inch big, and you can see here we're just taking a little bit more of that Indian Shadow. I mixed in just a bit of the pink flesh and just created the little highlight, and I'm just creating a little texture on his bottom lip just to bring some life there. I decided just to kind of start moving on to other places. Then I take that flesh and pale skin and mix that into the what was left, and then finished off those highlights on that bottom lip. Flat black is next from scale 75, and I'm going to start blocking in all his hair. And again, I figured, okay, well, the flesh was bugging me, and I figured, well, maybe it's because I don't really see the hair, because all the pictures I'm looking at of Henry Cavill, he's got quite dark hair. So I end up doing that. And then here at this point, I also came in with Gilliman flesh in the airbrush, spraying it around 20 psi, and I sprayed in an upward direction to the face. And I was actually much happier with how it looks after this. So that's how it looks. Actually, it looks more like Christopher Lee, a young Christopher Lee. But anyway, flat black and pink flesh are next. We're going to mix these. This is going to be roughly, I believe it's going to be more like 2 flesh to 1 black. Just a little bit thinner just to thin it out. I initially was mixing it in a 1-to-1, but it was just really not enough of a transition, so I mix another dollop of paint into it, and I get to a spot where I'm happier. And with this, because of how black the hair looked, it was really contrasting against the flesh. And all the pictures I see of Henry, especially when his beard is not quite as full, his beard does not take on this very, very dark tones, so it actually has more of a brown quality. His beard has more of a brown tone than his actual head hair, so I figured I'll run with that. And here I'm just simply bringing some more color into the eyebrows. And actually, once I laid this next color down, I was actually feeling more of the hair. It actually wasn't quite as dramatic looking and quite this stark, and I was starting to feel it again. And this is like the second day I was working on this model, and it was, sometimes you just got to get away and, have get a second opinion, as it were, which is, putting it down and not looking at it for a day. I highly recommend you do that once in a while, especially when you're just playing around with color. Pink flesh, we're going to add another little dollop into our mixture, so now it's probably more like a 3-to-1, 3 flesh to 1 black. And again, we're using our detail brush, and really with these brush strokes, I'm just kind of drawing downwards and creating just a little bit of that kind of furry look along his jawline. Just, kind of really bringing forward the idea of all this hair on his jaw and his chin and his mustache. The way it's sculpted, it is not very thick, but it is, quite detailed. So, and he also has a very prominent chin, so I figured that I'd concentrate more color in towards the chin so that it doesn't feel like a really dense beard and mustache. So that's why I'm building more color into these areas, so that it feels like there's more flesh kind of poking through, and it's not quite as dense. It actually starts to take on more of a gray appearance as well, but actually in person you can see there's a slight skin tone to it. But it was building more towards a gray, and actually I was kind of fine with that because, again, with the dramatic lines that we've built up on the model, I was just feeling it more again because this is more for a Space Marine anyway. This isn't a full one-to-one representation of Henry Cavill, as it were. We added another drop. I thinned it down with just the dampness of the brush, and then here I'm just putting in some very final highlights on some of these little areas. And again, with my brush stroke, I'm just creating almost like little dashes on the area so that we keep running with that look that it's a furry kind of texture. He's got a big furry face. And once that is done, we're going to add some pale skin. We're going to throw that right into the mixture. It's going to just jump it up just a bit and push it towards closer to white, but not quite. And I had the idea of maybe making it more like a white, so it looked like more like gray hair, but I decided against that. And I decided, just a few highlights here and there. And so you can see we're just simply catching just some of the final little high points just to bring a bit more brightness to some of these areas. Again, with the intention that this is not really a dense beard on him, more that we're seeing a bit more of his skin poking through. And so that's really what we're going for there. I also did the same thing on the eyebrows, other than this final highlight, I believe. Or maybe I did use some of this final highlight. But you can see here I did also touched up the mustache and his jawline. And I don't think I did the eyebrows because I wanted the eyebrows a little bit darker. Flat black and Caribbean blue is next. We're going to mix these in roughly a 1-to-1 mix ratio. We're going to add some medium to that just to help thin it out ever so slightly. Now, you don't really see much of a difference here, but to the eye, you can see the difference. And with this, I'm going to apply this pretty much over a lot of the surface area of his hair. Really just the deepest, darkest recesses are going to be left pure black. Otherwise, I'm going to bring this within a millimeter of some of those spaces. So the part in his hairline and close to his hairline on his face, we're leaving those pure black. Otherwise, you can see I'm just simply scrubbing this in all along the top of his head, and then on the sides here I'm picking out some of these bigger details of hair, as it were. And so we're just kind of going for just some of these big high points, and this is the initial highlight we're going for here. Normally I would go with more of a blue black, but I figured with this one, Caribbean blue, it has a bit of a green tinge to it, and so I was kind of happy with that. And in hindsight, it worked out fairly well. I'm going to add another dollop of it into the paint, making it roughly a 1-to-2, 1 black to 2 Caribbean blue. And with this, I'm going to just do more of the highlights, but I'm going to allow a bit more of the darker color to reside within between the details. So you can see here I'm being somewhat deliberate as we move around the model. And with this, it's just more or less just moving around, concentrating more of the color at the high points of the hair, leaving the part in his hair darker, and then just simply coming in and catching some of the high points. And you can see how on the curvature of his hair, how it comes back from his ear and everything like that, and his sideburns. And that's really all we're doing. We're just catching those and just bringing more volume to that texture, as it were. And actually I'm going to bring a little bit more gray towards his temples as well, just because making him look older is kind of cool, and looks like a Space Marine kind of thing. We're throwing a little bit more of this Caribbean blue into the mixture, making it more like a 1-to-3. Throwing a bit more medium into it just to thin it out and just to help with flow. Again, we're being very deliberate now, and we're just applying just very minimal amounts of highlights. I'm trying to be as careful as possible, as I want to create that texture of hair. Now, we're not going to go bananas like we did on the beard and such, so where we're just going for a full, chia pet type look here. We're just getting just the big strands of hair, and again, we're just kind of basically just following our gut. Now, when we get closer to the temples, I also push some of the deeper color, or the lighter color, I should say, closer. You can see there's actually kind of this black line where the initial texture was, we created with the brush stroke the impression that the hair is coming back. You can see it's kind of like a jagged line following where the flesh and his hair are, and that's still quite stark black. And so I actually come in with some of the highlight color and push that into that space, so it doesn't feel quite as abrupt as it like a black line separating his hair and his face. We're going to add some white to this mixture, just for giggles. So basically it's a 1:3:1 kind of thing. And with this, it's a very, very minimal highlight. And I'm going to concentrate mostly just on this top part of his hair and up by his sideburns. And I think the little strands that come over his face as well. I throw a little bit of this highlight on there. And you can see this color actually starts to almost look like Incubi Darkness for anybody who's familiar with Citadel colors. I'm going to chuck a little bit more white into this mixture. So now it's more like a 1:3:2 for anybody who's keeping score. And here again, I'm just putting just a little bit more in the temple area again, just to kind of give him more of a, I don't know, a senior space marine kind of look. I don't know. It was an aesthetics choice. I actually kind of considered doing some of his hair more closer to white, actually, but I decided against it because I still wanted to feel more, it still represent the man as opposed to, the version of the guy that we're kind of painting up here. I'm going to take non-oil gloss. I'm just going to generously apply this to the model. We could have just as easily used the matte variety. I just threw the gloss on just because I wanted to see how it all was looking, and I just wanted a bit of a slick appearance as well. Initially, I mean, this is not the final verdict on how the hair is actually going to look. I just wanted to just see how it all goes, and I also only do it just to the hair. I don't apply it to the eyebrows or the beard because, again, I wanted his hair darker and his beard separate. Pallid Witch Flesh is next. We're going to slap a little bit onto our palette. We're going to add just a drop or two of medium, thin this down using our detail brush, and we are going to use this color for the eyeball itself. I'm using Pallid Witch Flesh instead of white because white, well, it's just too darn bright, but the Pallid Witch Flesh is actually very, very bright. Contrast Aethermatic Blue is next, and with this I'm going to begin applying his eyes. Now his eyes are a nice big bright blue, and with this color you can see I'm allowing more of the color to build up to the high point of the eyeball. And if you're familiar with how we do gemstones, where we apply the darker color above and get brighter towards the bottom, that's really kind of the theory we're running with when doing the eyeball. It's kind of like treating it like little mini gemstones. Talisar Blue is next. Thinned out just a little bit with the dampness of the brush, and again we're going to apply this right into the iris. Yeah, it's the iris, isn't it? Yeah. And again, because we have it thinned out, we can apply it over the entirety of the eyeball and then just push the color so it builds up to a darker blue up towards the high point. And so once I've done about, I think, 2 layers, you can see here how we have a nice bright blue. And again, his eyes look really kind of gigantic at the moment, but we'll clear that up. Jumping back into some Aethermatic Blue, I'm going to mix that into the Pallid Witch Flesh that's on my palette, making just a slightly off Aethermatic and Pallid Witch Flesh. And I'm going to create the little spot highlights along the bottom of the iris. And what I'm also going to create it kind of like the texture in the eye. You know how the eye kind of has this fibrous type of look. And so I'm kind of going for that textured kind of look in the bottom portion of that eye. Talisar Blue again, thinned out with just the dampness of the brush, and again I'm going to apply it over the entirety of the pupil of the eye again to bring it all and give me this really ice cold kind of blue that he has. I don't know if his eyes are really this bright blue, but he's getting them this bright blue anyway. Next we're going to come in with some flat black, thinned it out just with the dampness of the brush, and we're going to slap those pupils in there. Very challenging. I was much happier when I thinned the color way down. It actually almost looks like cat eyes at that point. So I actually go back and forth a couple times, and I also come back in with the flesh tones and do his lower eyelids, as you can see here. But otherwise, that is that. And so now we're pretty much done with the main portion of his face. So we're going to come in with some white scar. And this is going to be for the little spot highlights in the eye. And actually he's in the eye that's to the right of ourselves. The dot is a little bit bigger than on the left-hand side, but I actually kind of like how that looks. It kind of gives his eye kind of, I don't know, a little bit of character and such. But that is it. That is the 1:12 scale Henry Cavill sculpt that's going to be slapped onto my Intercessor Bandai Space Marine. Big thank you to all my patrons. Without their support, these videos would not be possible. If you're considering Patreon support, click the link in the description below and you'll be taken off to the magical website of Patreon, where there's varying tiers of support, and a huge thank you to everybody who does. Take care of those brushes, and they will take care of you.